Thank you for the introduction and for the invitation for this symposium, this program. So I'm a lecturer in University of East Anglia, that's Norwich. So that's just the eastern corner of England, and I'm based in the Faculty of Medicine and Health. And thank you, Susan, for the introduction. So I'm going to talk today about the Sibs Project, which is very kindly funded by the Prader-Willi Syndrome Association UK and hosted in my Faculty of Medicine and Health School of Health Sciences. So in this project, I'm going to talk about the study we did looking at the experiences and support needs of what we call unaffected siblings, or siblings who don't have Prader-Willi syndrome, but they are part of a family where there's an individual with Prader-Willi syndrome and their parents. So the question and the aim that drove this project was our initial consultation and discussions with IPWSO UK, where they were interested to hear the sibling voice, the voice of the sibling who's not affected by Prader-Willi, and the family environment and parents. So the project aim was to investigate the personal narratives around the lived experience of having a sibling with Prader-Willi and to understand the support needs. So it was a twofold aim that this project had. And the objective was to understand the siblings' narrative, but also what do the parents think about the unaffected sibling, the sibling who doesn't have Prader-Willi. So we wanted to hear the siblings' narrative from themselves, but also wanting to get the parents' perspective on what they think is happening in the family. These aims and objectives were grounded in a knowledge of the literature that we know siblinghood is such the first very stable, the lifelong bond that siblings have within themselves. Siblings, if you think about family systems, family as a dynamic system which has these individual subsystems, that is parent-child relationship, parent-to-parent relationship, and you have the siblings relationship, which is an independent system itself. And the dynamic unit that families are, impact on one individual always has negative or positive consequences on the other units of the system as well. So something happening to one sibling will have an impact on the other sibling, and something happening between the parents. So it's a dynamic system where things are always in a flux, kind of interacting and communicating and reciprocating to each other. If you put something like a chronic neurodevelopmental condition, then the impact it has on the entire family system is documented in a range of neurodevelopmental conditions. Autism, for example, is very well researched, one of those conditions. What you do find across the spectrum of these conditions generally is there is difference between how parents perceive the changes or the challenges and impact that a sibling's disability is having on the family system versus how the siblings who don't have the condition perceive. So there is a kind of a disconnect sometimes between the individual views, between the views of the different subsystems of the family system. And if you put Prader-Willi within this equation, which has its own specific, unique challenges that we know of, then what happens to the system was the driving force that has given rise to the questions and the objectives that we were looking at. So we first wanted to understand what literature, what evidence base says about the siblings' perspective and the parents' perspective. So we did a systematic review, which I'm currently writing up, to look at what existing literature tells us about experiences of unaffected siblings of individuals with PWS. We found lots of results because we did a very thorough systematic search across several databases, but we only found 9 studies that were meeting our inclusion criteria, which had siblings of Prader-Willi, individuals with Prader-Willi, and they were presenting their views. So most of the studies were totally focused on parents' perspective, or asking the parents to reflect on both their children's perspective. So from a sibling point of view, they went to many studies. What we did find was consistent recommendation to consider the individual characteristics of the siblings in regards to experience of other family members as well. So what we did find was the limited number of studies were recommending to listen to the siblings' voice. Whereas if you look at the limited number of evidence with the advice that is on the PWSA websites across the globe, so UK, US, Australia, or other places, they all stress about the importance of supporting the sibling who doesn't have Prader-Willi, or the unaffected siblings. But when you contrast that with the evidence base, there is again a discordance there. So that was the driving force that confirmed that it's really essential and useful to look at the study, listening at the siblings' voices and the narratives around their experiences. So we designed a qualitative study where we interviewed the unaffected siblings and parents of individuals with PWS. We spoke to the siblings separately, and we spoke to the parents separately. It wasn't a requirement that the siblings and parents needed to be from the same family units. In some cases they were, but that wasn't the inclusion criteria. So we had two independent groups. These were recruited via convenient snowball sampling, and our funder, PWSA UK, was phenomenal in advertising the study and just getting the word out. And we had a very, very healthy interest in taking part in the study. But as it happens with recruitment challenges, our final sample that partake in the study was much smaller than expected, but there was a high level of interest. So being a qualitative study, we were mainly focusing on hearing the voice of our participants, hearing to know about their perceptions. And we did that by means of a semi-structured online focus groups and pair interviews. Social construction is a theoretical framework that was driving this research, but also the kind of questions we were asking, or we designed to ask our participants. So an example of interview questions we asked were about to the siblings was, tell us about your sibling with Prader-Willi syndrome. What is it like in your house growing up? What is it like in your house for the other child? And that's an example for of the parent question. So we didn't go in expecting an answer, but we kept it as broad and as open-ended as possible. And we used the social constructionist approach, that is, the narrative is developed from our participants, because the participants are the ones who hold the reality, and we are trying to understand the reality. And that framework pretty much informed our data analysis strategy as well, which we looked at the interview data in terms of what themes and discourse quotes come out of that, how what are the words, what are the phrases being used, and how can we theme those ideas and narratives that have been presented. So that was pretty much stage one of our research, which I'm going to talk about. That is to what we understood from listening to the experiences of the unaffected siblings and their parents. We also had a stage two of the research, which we then invited the same group of participants again for nominal group technique for a consensus meeting, a brainstorming consensus meeting, to then get a better understanding of the support needs that they think are most prominent, would be most useful from a future intervention development point of view. But I wouldn't focus so much on stage two. I will focus mainly on stage one for this talk. So as I said, we had a phenomenal level of interest, but our sample that actually converted into interviews was slightly smaller than expected, just under half of what we expected. We had online interviews, so we were hoping that would make participation possible for as many individuals as you can, because there's no restrictions on travel and those sorts of things. We offered weekend, evening, etc. interviews, but it was a transition correspondence between interest and recruitment into data points was slightly lower. What we did do is we wanted to cover the age range across 11 years onwards. So we wanted to have the siblings group across different ages. So we had three distinct groups of siblings. Siblings in the ages of 11 to 13 years, then 14 to 17, and 17 plus years. So we had one or two groups of the lower ages and the one or two groups of the middle ages and 17 plus years. We also had the parents as an independent group. So all in all, we had about 19 people who were part of our recruitment sample, and we had 7 units of analysis. So in altogether, we had about 7 focus groups, which is a decent number if you are doing some sort of a focus group analysis, because it gives you more data to cross-check across the individual groups and slightly more confidence in terms of the reliability. It's a qualitative data, but in terms of the rigor and the dependability of the data, it gives you some more scope to talk about that. We had more number of participants from the older age groups, and why we think that happened, I'll talk as we go along. So what did we find from these groups? When we did the semantic discourse analysis, we had a huge number of themes come up, which we had to distill down and condense into manageable number of themes. So we had certain themes clustered across different age groups and a different group of participants, but there was a good overlap and cross-cutting themes that were present in all across all age groups, and there were certain unique themes that were specific to the parents, but there was a good level of correspondence across the different groups that we were looking at. And this is an example of some of the minor themes. For example, in the old age groups, there were minor themes around sibling mental health and well-being, the life outcomes of sibling with a PWS. In the middle age groups, we had a bit of accommodation. For parents, we had parents talking about beyond the family home, so adjustment of the whole family and so on. So we had pages and pages of interview data, and which we had to look at for themes going forward. But what was apparent, as you can see from this slide, is there was a good correspondence across the different themes. So these were the 4 themes that you see in the red quadrants on this slide, were quite prominent across all the groups. Family and relationships was a theme that was prominent across all the groups. And the minor themes that were making the major theme of family and relationships were about intrafamilial relationships, so in a relationship between individual members of the family, strategies for family life, how to deal with day-to-day challenges, how to deal with day-to-day stressors, so what worked for those individuals, impact on family life as a whole, and beyond the family life, that is when individuals are reflecting on grandparents, on the extended family members and friends and so on, outside their immediate family unit. Then you had the major theme of accommodation and adjustment, where there was a very striking minor themes around self as a carer. So individuals reflected on themselves as a carer, either in the present times or going forward in the future. There was a talk about the individuals, that is the siblings without Prader-Willi, moving into the background. And there was some reflection and impact on self. The major theme around awareness and understanding was about building knowledge, lack of awareness in professionals, and that's something that came up again and again. And I attended the presentation this morning, and there was some resonance with that presentation as well. And the need for tailored advice when help and advice is sought from clinicians. There was advocacy as a major theme, which was about standing up for the rights of the sibling with Prader-Willi. But each of these major themes were quite interrelated with each other. Here are some of the quotes. I'll summarize these in terms of the essence that these verbatim quotes are talking about. So when we look at the major theme of family and relationship and the minor themes under that, that is strategy for family life, we have a sibling who's 17 plus years, talking about so siblings, the older siblings, that is 17 plus years, did a lot of retrospection. There was a lot of hindsight and knowledge and wisdom. That was, the advantage of hindsight, but there's a lot of retrospection, how things were, and the impact that they have on the history, that the impact that it is having on their present life. So here the sibling with 17 plus years is talking about if my sister wasn't already at home, when I go home, I did have a chat about my day to day very, very quickly, because as soon as my sister was here, it was very difficult to have a conversation at all. So getting that little space which they felt wouldn't be there once their sister with PWS comes home. The impact on intrafamiliar relations. So that was a strategy to manage the need for attention, whilst also not taking away the time that is required for their sibling with PWS. The intra-family relationship, here they're reflecting, so these are the younger participants, age 11 to 13 years, they're reflecting on the difficulty and the stresses that the condition poses on individual members of the family. There were some reflections with participants in the middle and old ages about the accommodation and adjustments moving in the background. That happens, that they're realizing their sibling with PWS comes first, needs to come first. The relationship with food. Our older group participants really talked about relationship with food, but that wasn't so much but that was mainly about how their thinking around food had changed, how the thinking around treats and snacks and meal times and had changed over time. So here in this quote, this participant is talking about just going hungry, because it's common for them to feel hungry, not thinking anything differently about that. So when I look at all these individual groups and the correspondence of themes across these groups, this is the image how I understand how one way we can look at one way we can look at what siblinghood looks like or feels like in a household with an individual with Prader-Willi syndrome. For the unaffected siblings, in the younger age group, so that is our 11 to 13 years old, there was a lot of emphasis on advocacy. So there were instances of experiences shared around the younger, the sibling in this age group being having to stand up for their sibling with PWS at doctors, for example. There was an incident of the sibling needing an injection and the parent being busy with paperwork and things, and the doctor getting a bit anxious about why you so upset, is just an injection, it's not going to hurt so much and all. So the unaffected sibling talking for their sibling with PWS, saying my sister or my brother has this condition, which means they tend to behave in this way. So it's kind of protecting their sibling with PWS, advocating for the individual PWS. So Advocacy was a main, quite a striking theme in that younger age group. Whereas in the middle age group, there was accommodation and adjustment. Quite a striking theme around accommodation and adjustment. That is the moving in the background. And you might have heard this term around glass children, which is being talked a lot these days about typically developing siblings of children with disabilities, putting themselves in the background so that they do not put stresses on the family system when it comes to their needs being met. And that was a striking theme around accommodating and adjusting around their experiences in order to support the needs of their sibling. In the older age group, we have quite a bit of striking themes around sharing experiences, wanting to reach out to a wider audience, wanting to reach out to other individuals who share the similar context and the therapeutic, the cathartic experiences that are associated with that. So if you think about siblinghood, the trajectory of siblinghood across the age groups, and this is the developmental trajectory one can think about. Although these groups are independent, so you can't say every person will go through that journey. But even if you put these different age groups on the developmental timeline, then this is what it looks like. Another striking thing which comes from the data is how the different age groups talk about relationship with food. In the younger age group, it was about meal times, the tension around meal times, the younger age groups wanting to quickly have their meals before the individual with PWS comes in, or the sibling comes in, and they can probably take their food to their rooms and having their own time, or really their parent giving them some snacks without their sibling with PWS knowing. So the tension around meal times and adjustments around meal times is what they mainly spoke about when it comes to food. The middle age groups talked about the guilt they felt when they were given a treat in secret, so that and not to upset their sibling with Prader-Willi, and the guilt it left with them. In the older age groups, which had the advantage of hindsight and retrospection, um, they were using that knowledge to reflect on their current relationship with food, which is just going hungry or feeling very surprised that when they move away from home to university or to job, the fact that they have freedom to choose their meals, they have freedom to eat what they like, when they like, how they like, without any in having to look over their shoulder in their words. Some of them spoke about unhealthy relationship with food. No one really said anything about eating disorders per se, but they spoke about unhealthy relationship with food. So interestingly, they're all talking about the relationship with food, but the impact each of these groups is talking about is slightly different, in which is very unique to these experiences they have experienced across their age groups. But what was actually quite striking as well was the family and relationships, the impact on family and relationships that each of these four groups talked about, including the parents. Whereas from a parent's point of view, it was mainly about um, uh, their added responsibility, how that's impacting on the family unit, the impact it's having on themselves as an individual, as a parent, um, and the parent also reflecting about their siblings with who don't have Prader-Willi, going more towards the caring professions. And again, that's something that was picked up in this morning's presentation, and something our siblings shared as well, that they naturally felt inclined as part of their accommodation and adjustment. They felt naturally inclined towards going into caring professions, therapy, counseling, and all sorts of other professions. In fact, even our younger siblings spoke about, they naturally gravitate towards friendship groups which have additional needs. So they spoke about being very friendly with individuals across the spectrum of neurodiversity, them being very confident, very comfortable in dealing with individuals with ADHD, autism, because they just know, the challenges that behavior can pose, and they naturally felt better equipped or natural empathy in order to support the needs. And that's what the parents reflected upon, that they are aware their children are taking up caring informally and probably in the future formally for the sibling with PWS. So, having looked at these different groups, what was quite apparent is the similarity across the participant groups. Although there were some distinct group specific themes, the similarity was quite evident, which we did manage to capture through the voices of both siblings and parents, and the correspondence we had across these individual groups. Um, the interconnectedness of each of these themes does indicate, and it's a promising sign, we think, that addressing concerns in one area can also positively impact on other areas. So when you're looking at developing any future interventions on family centeredness, you want an intervention that can be sustainable. You want an intervention that can transfer its advantage into other areas of the family system. And hence, looking at the family system and the individual subsystems, looking at a holistic intervention would seem promising. Although these are only early level indicators, but that's a good indication of the theoretical standpoint that can be taken in terms of looking at family centeredness in Prader-Willi syndrome, and the interventions that can be developed from there on in the short term, but also in the long term. Some list of references, and I kind of lost track of time, but thank you very much to our funders, PWSA UK, and to all the audience who have joined us today. Thank you very much.